You know what really pisses me off about modern Disney? No, it's their increasing reliance on lazy, cash-grab, live-action remakes of classic animated movies, which accomplish nothing except to remind us how much better the originals were in every single respect. Not to mention their weird attempts to rewrite history and retcon famous villains into tragically misunderstood anti-heroes. So as you can probably imagine, I wasn't terribly impressed by the trailer for Cruella, the lazy, cash-grab, live-action prequel to a classic animated movie that tries to rewrite history and retcon a famous villain into a tragically misunderstood anti-hero. I mean, it's bad enough that you're once again trying to cash in on past glories instead of coming up with something new and creative, but Jesus Christ, haven't you guys already milked 101 Dalmatians for all it's worth? First there was the animated movie back in the 1960s, then a live-action remake in the 90s, and a shitty sequel in the year 2000. And I keep thinking, is this really such a fascinating story that we have to keep revisiting it? Now the year is 2021, and because apparently nobody can come up with anything new anymore, we're being treated to this piece of garbage set in 1970s London. At least I assume it's the 70s based on the cars, buildings and general level of technology, but the characters all seem to be dressed like a really over-the-top parody of the 1920s, so who even knows at this point? The trailer kicks off with a young Cruella de Vil arriving at a posh hotel in London, accompanied by a self-indulgent voiceover from Emma Stone, where she talks about how smart and awesome she is, and tries to paint herself as a maverick outsider that's going to upset the stuffy London establishments. You're a spoiled rich girl with an old Etonian accent, love. Trust me, you're not upsetting anything.
I'm afraid I was very drunk.
The trailer also keeps cutting to an old woman that seems to have a history with Cruella. This is Baroness von Hellman, the head of the fashion house that Cruella works for. Get it? Devil and Hellman together? Fuck off, trailer. Whenever anyone mentions Hellman to me, all I can think of is their delicious, delicious mayonnaise. Anyway, I think you can guess where this one's going. Baroness von Mayonnaise is probably going to be the antagonist of the movie, and she seems to be some kind of master thief based on this scene where she breaks into a bank vault. Will the two of them turn out to be rivals to see who can be the bestest criminal ever? Does anyone even care at this point? Then Cruella rocks up to a swanky party in a white dress, and for some reason the film goes from 101 Dalmatians to the Hunger Games in the blink of an eye. What the fuck is even happening here? You realise this isn't something you can actually do in the real world, right? It was ridiculous enough when Jennifer Lawrence did it, but that was the future with all kinds of crazy new technology, and this is the 1970s. They barely even had pocket calculators back then. There's also lots of little cuts of robberies and heists and car chases, which I guess implies that Cruella is going to be some kind of criminal struggling to get out from under Baroness von Mayonnaise and earn some respect for herself. I mean, she seems to think she's pretty fucking smart.
The thing is, I was born brilliant.
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
And of course, if all else fails, just throw in a bit of half-arsed female empowerment and hope for the best.
I am woman, hear me roar.
Oh look, she's lying on a bed looking completely crazy. Now she's partying in a nightclub. Now she's destroying a building with reckless abandon. Now ask yourself the question, who does this remind us of? Yeah, it took people about 3 seconds to see the very obvious parallels between this movie and Harley Quinn. Both characters dress in ridiculously flamboyant outfits that no real person would ever wear. Both of them are part of the criminal underworld, both of them like to party, both have a tenuous grip on reality, and both are implied to be a lot smarter than they appear. Now that's all lovely, and it demonstrates just the kind of striking imagination you'd expect from Disney these days. But the thing you have to ask yourself is, do you really want to be like Harley Quinn, one of the biggest box office bombs of last year? There seems to be a real attempt with this movie to recast Cruella as some kind of cool, punkish, rebellious wild child who plays by her own rules. Like this is someone they expect you to root for by the end of the film. This is literally the same woman who wants to murder puppies and turn them into designer handbags. Is this really someone you expect audiences to empathise with? Harley Quinn was an asshole to be sure. She was violent and selfish and completely unhinged, but I never really got the impression that she was a cruel character. If anything, she had a pretty good heart buried beneath all the ridiculous outfits and questionable New Jersey accents. So in theory at least, it wasn't that much of a stretch to turn her into a sympathetic anti-hero. Joker, on the other hand, took us down a much darker path, delivering a deeply disturbed character that you absolutely weren't expected to like or support. But that movie presented itself as a serious drama about a man's descent into madness, whereas Cruella is very clearly meant to be a dark comedy. I mean, it is Disney after all. How serious do you expect it to be? The point here is that both of the movies Cruella seems to model itself after were ultimately very different from it in their own ways, either in the context of their main characters or their overall emotional tone. The end result is the movie equivalent of trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Disney are trying to generate a cool, quirky, sympathetic protagonist from one of the most unashamedly evil villains in their history, and place her at the centre of some jumbled black comedy action heist plot that's probably going to be a lot less fun and smart than the Ocean's 11 movies. There seems to be a real push within Disney to revisit classic antagonists, retconning them into something they were never intended to be. Maleficent gave us a completely different perspective on the witch from Sleeping Beauty, turning her into the tragic victim of oppression and exploitation. By a man, of course. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Cruella's journey is framed as one brave woman's fight against the patriarchy. Something tells me that well-known male villains won't be getting this same treatment. Now don't get me wrong, the writer in me usually appreciates it when antagonists are given a bit of nuance and depth to their personalities. It makes them realistic and grounded, and helps the audience understand their point of view. But the time to do that kind of thing is when they're actually relevant to the story, not decades later when you've decided to milk them for a bit of nostalgia money. Developing smart, well-balanced characters with complex motivations right off the bat isn't the same thing as inventing a completely new backstory for them and trying to awkwardly bend it around what's already been done. That's like going back to a test paper after the exam's over and adding completely new answers to questions that were never asked in the first place. In short, it's fucking cheating. And the question I keep coming back to is, why? Why is Disney constantly resorting to lazy crap like this, retelling old stories and trying to put half-hearted new spins on old characters? Why can't they come up with anything new or interesting anymore? They remind me of an aging boxer in the waning days of his career, vainly trying to recapture the magic of his glory days and refusing to move on to new things, even as the rest of the world slowly loses interest in him. And honestly, it feels like Cruella is shaping up to be another loss on their increasingly tarnished fight records. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.